lions and lionesses. In this audio, I'm going to teach you how to take your DNA nutrition results and put them into action. Now, before I do, I want to introduce a few concepts, some important information. Starting with DNA is not your destiny. You're not born and then certain things happen. DNA are probabilities and preferences. Like, we use this test to know what your body's preferred fuel source or sources are. And that's going to tell us your optimum diet type. But there are other things that are far more important. But the DNA part is based off of your daily decisions and actions. So what are the factors that affect what genes are turned on? Are the good genes turned on and the bad genes turned off? I mean, that is ideal. That's a very simplistic view, but it's accurate. So not just food affects your DNA, your genetic expression, but also your emotional states. Your beliefs affect it. Your perceptions affect it. The climate affects it. All types of stress, all types of challenges like exercise, resistance training, cardiovascular conditioning, all affects gene expression. So everything is constantly interacting with your genes. Because what are your genes? Well, they're found in the nucleus of most cells. And they are the blueprint to make new cells. So if you snap your fingers, millions of cells just died. You're made up of trillions of cells with a T, and 330 billion cells are estimated to die and be reproduced each day. Hopefully, when you lose them, they come back, right? That's the key. Our daily actions, our lifestyle determines that. And so when these cells break down and they need to be replaced, the DNA is that blueprint to make new healthy cells. And so why is the DNA test important? Well, it's a new frontier. I've been doing DNA testing since 2006, maybe a little earlier than that actually. And at first they were not very useful at all. Now they are much more useful because we understand what's true and what's not. And so in the book Life Force, I wrote a section in it about this, and it's on page 295. I'm just going to read it verbatim. It says, another useful tool to determine how your body utilizes carbohydrates and fats is a genetic test. In a 2-year study comparing the effects of a genetically matched diet versus a ketogenic diet, now that could be any diet. In this study, both groups ate the same amount of calories, so the same amount of food. That's important. Most studies don't take that into account, and that provides misleading findings, okay? So this isn't picking on a ketogenic diet, because some people do well with that based off their DNA, and other people not so much, right? That's why they get random results. But I'm going to read through this. So after the first 12 weeks, since they ate the same amount of calories, their weight loss was nearly identical. But after 2 years, the participants in the ketogenic group began to gain their weight back as they struggled to stay consistent because they weren't eating according to their DNA. They're forcing things. That's my theory. Those who ate according to their genotype not only lost significantly more weight, but also reduced total cholesterol, increased the beneficial HDL cholesterol, and improved fasting blood glucose levels. It appears that humans from different ancestral backgrounds utilize carbohydrates and fats differently. Why is this? International travel is a new occurrence. It's been only over the last century that humans began to travel in masses. Prior to this, cultures married within the same population, so the gene pool was similar. So was their food choices. Consider the Inuit, who reside in the harsh Arctic climate. For centuries, they consumed a diet mainly of fat and protein from fatty cold water fish, seals, and caribou, with very little in the way of plants. No agricultural or dairy products, and was unusually low in carbohydrates. Compare this to the traditional Caribbean Islander diet, which is the polar opposite of the Inuit. High in plant-based carbohydrates, derived from fruits and roots, and very low fat seafood. Because the water is warm, they don't need to have fat, because they don't need to be insulated like in the Arctic Ocean. Now, what happens when these two groups have children? What about when their children have children? There's only one way to find out for sure. Genetically test to see what traits they inherited. This type of testing offers important data that can help eliminate the trial and error of your body's genetically preferred fuel source is carbohydrates, fats, or a combination of the two. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, what's more important than your preferred fuel source? You ready for this? One, the total amount of food you eat, the amount of calories you ingest. That's the number one. That is the first law of thermodynamics. I've talked about this at length in other audios. So if you have questions on it, feel free to ask me or revert back to those. But I'm going to stay focused on this. The second thing after calories is protein intake. Are you getting enough protein to protect your muscle, but also feel full so you don't overeat? Now, does the quality of food matter? Yes. We want to eat foods closest to their natural source the majority of the time, but it doesn't have to be all the time. There are really no bad foods because every food will help you live a long time. I can tell you story after story of people that were in extreme situations that ate like crackers or ketchup. There's a man that ate ketchup for 70 something days and survived on a raft. Like, your body is amazing. And so we don't have to be perfect with this, but we need to be consistent. We need to keep an eye on things so it doesn't stack up. And then before we know it, we've gained a bunch of fat and lost muscle, and now we're in trouble. We got to do something extreme, right? And so to review, the things that are most important are the quantity of food you eat, and what affects that is the quality of food you eat. Because there's foods like that are highly processed that you like potato chips or all this junk food you call it. You can eat a ton of it and not feel full. And then you want to eat more of it because that's just what it does to our dopamine, right? We get rewarded for those flavors. And so we want to make sure we're fueling the body, not just focusing on flavor and pleasure. Very important. Now, we have the quantity of food, so calories, and the amount of protein. Now we look at the preferred fuel source. That's the order of priority I would look at this in. Now, look at your DNA test. And this thing's like a book. That's why we don't apply everything at once. In fact, a lot of this is not useful at all. But the things I'm going to share with you over the course of this is very important. And it may, as we go through, we may find it's even more important than I even know at this point. But optimum diet type is, you want to go to the page that says table of contents because it summarizes everything in the whole book here, in the whole report. And so there are 4 types of diets based off their genetics. So nutrigenomic diets, we'll call them. The first one's a balanced diet. The second is a Mediterranean diet. The third one is a low-fat, high-protein diet. And the fourth one is a low-carbohydrate diet. Now, none of these are zero anything. There's no zero-fat diet. There's no zero-carbohydrate diet. There are no really bad things. If you follow the plan here, you will find that you can eat pretty much anything. It's just the amounts of things that matter. That's how you do this for life. You go too extreme, it's not going to be a pretty long term. It makes it hard to stick to it. So here's how you use this though. So everyone right now has a nutrition plan. And if you haven't seen it, make sure you check your messages because you have one. Now, some of you are tracking your food. Keep doing it. If you enjoy it, by all means. Now, a lot of you are going to use the fire fuel system too, which is you're still tracking your food, but you're using your hand as a portioning tool to eat a consistent amount of food. So here's what you do. You follow your current plan. You make sure you're doing your North Star. You are summoning the lion. You're following the assigned training program, not doing random stuff. I can't coach people if they're doing random things. We need to follow a plan. We need consistency. You need to take in those baseline measurements, right? And then measure again and measure again. You're like, hey, I'm making progress. Great. This is awesome. And then what do? You get stuck eventually because your body adapts to all types of stress. This is called metabolic adaptation. That's why every diet works for a few weeks, right? But not forever because your body will adapt so that you can survive. Keep that in mind. So you're following your plan, right? And let's say the first week you're doing great. Second week, you lost fat, your strength's still going up. That's great. Third week, you didn't lose any weight. Your strength's about the same. All right, that's the plateau. Now, what do? Well, if you stop losing fat, well, we've got to create more of a deficit because your body adapted. And so we need to reduce calories from either protein or not protein, never protein. We always keep protein constant, from either carbs or fats or both. And that's based off of another part of this test. So you just go down under exercise and weight loss, and it'll say best diet for weight loss. Now, weight loss, we want to focus on fat loss, not weight loss, because fat loss is losing fat and preserving lean muscle. Keep that in mind. So let's say the best diet for weight loss comes up as low-fat diet. That means you are going to cut your calories. So say you're going to reduce your calories. You got stuck at the plateau. We're going to reduce calories by 200 calories per day, and it's going to come from fat in this case. So now we know where to adjust it. And why is this important? Well, what we find is when you eat according to your DNA, it's easier to stick to it. You have less cravings. It requires less self-control and willpower. And we're not real sure why, but we know we are aligned with working with the DNA. And so for some reason, people are feeling more satiated as they reduce their calories. And so it doesn't affect other areas of your life. Because when you get to the point where you're so hungry, you're so thinking about it, that's too much. We now have to do a different technique. We need to speed metabolism. I call it medicine. And so metabolism, stimulation. This is where we're going to focus on adding lean muscle and boosting metabolism and doing that for a period of time, and then reduce the calories again and go back into a fat burning phase. So we're constantly adding lean muscle and strength, boosting metabolism, and alternating that with periods of basically cleansing, like a fat cell cleanse, because we're releasing the contents of fat cells whenever you're releasing fat for fuel. That's what we're doing. So there's an ebb and flow. Everyone that I've ever heard of, that I learned from, they're always doing one thing, just hammering. If you can't stick to it, it's your fault. That's not how this works. This is about self-mastery. There's an ebb and flow. There's a rhythm to life. And that's what we're here to learn. Now, we want to look through things through the lens of your DNA test whenever you learn new things as well. So this is like a lens that you run things through. So if you hear about someone that lost a lot of weight and you're intrigued, maybe you're like, oh, I need to do that. You don't want to freak out. You just don't want to blindly follow other people because we really don't know what the variables are. We want to see what really happened. So if someone lost 100 pounds, my question is, how much of that was fat? What does their blood work look like? Are they actually healthier? What are their joints doing? Are they in pain a lot of the time? These are just a handful of questions. You want to know if it's really something that you want to do. Is it sustainable? Like I have a friend that lost over 100 pounds, and I was telling him, I'm like, hey man, you really got to do some resistance training, get your protein up. Because he just kept doing more and more cardio. He was on an elliptical all the time. Like it was not sustainable. I mean like 3 hours a day, sometimes more. And if he ate bad, he would do more. So you try to out-exercise the diet, and you can lose weight that way, but he lost a ton of muscle, mostly muscle, I would say. Looked like a melted candle. And then when the pandemic came around, he wasn't inspired. He wasn't getting that external validation from other people. And so he just blew up and gained way more than that. And that's super common. But he got caught up in just the number on the scale. And we don't want to do that. That's why we have a results tracking system, right? Where we look at your strength from week 1 to week 2 in your program. But we also take those tape measurements and we run it through and estimate your body fat percentage. Those are really important things. All right, back on track here. Now, there's a section on the table of contents on the right-hand side. It says reactions to food. Now, there's a gray zone to this, and I want you to understand that, so please pay attention. There are no good or bad foods. Humans are remarkable at surviving, so keep that in mind. Now, some people can have a sensitivity or intolerance that they don't even know they have because it's so mild, it's not a big deal at all. Other people can have a severe intolerance and like have to live in the bathroom like instant, right? So you probably know if you have a severe one, but you have like a moderate one or no. The only way to know is to look at this, get a clue, and then eliminate it and then add it back in without changing anything else. That's called an elimination diet. But it's where you're testing one variable, so you keep everything else consistent. So on here it says lactose intolerance. Now keep in mind, it's going to say like more likely or significantly likely or whatever. If you're more likely, you probably have some sort of lactose malabsorption. Now what is lactose? It's found in milk products, and it is the sugar or the carbohydrate. All carbohydrates, all sugars are carbohydrates, let's just say. And lactose, this is a crazy stat. So I wasn't going to share it, but I'm going to anyway. The National Institute of Health estimates that 68% of the population, now they haven't tested everyone, of course, but 68% of the population has lactose malabsorption. That doesn't mean that it's severe, it just means there's some imbalance, if that makes sense. Now, some people do great on it. So is dairy good or bad for you? Well, if you don't have any food, it's really good for you because it'll keep you alive. Now, we often are taught that there are good foods and evil foods. Really what there are foods that are nutrient dense, close to their natural source, which makes us feel full and have a bunch of micronutrients in it that serve many other purposes. And then there's nutrient less. Foods that have less nutrients are almost none, like highly processed foods. Now, there are processed foods that are functional foods that have a ton of nutrients in them. So not all processed foods are actually bad, and they will all keep you alive. So I want to get this out of your head that there is these extremes. So when we're not a master of something, everything is good or bad. As we become a master of something and we start to have an in-depth understanding of it, we realize that it depends on the scenario and situation. And then what's most important? Like if you have no food, eating crackers is a great idea, right? like if you're starving. That's an extreme example. But what I'm saying is start to look at things not as good or bad, but hey, based off my current goal and what's going on in this moment, how does this fit in? Is this ideal? Is it positive? Or is it negative? What's most important, right? That's the mindset we want to get into. So with dairy, go ahead and read yours and see what it says, and then decide, hey, do I want to eliminate it for a bit? Because some dairy products are great for you. Like a lot of people can have the high protein Greek yogurt that have lactose intolerance. They have no problem with it. Now, when you get let's look at milk by itself. Milk, there's pasteurized milk, there's raw milk. I won't get into that whole thing, but there's a difference between those. Some people can have raw milk cheese and they thrive on it. Other people, have but those same people can have regular cheese and they don't do well on it. So there is some experimentation. This isn't going to tell you everything. Keep that in mind. Now, what else is in milk? You have the carbohydrate, then there's dairy fat, unless it's been removed. And then there's the protein. There's two types of protein in milk. There's casein, which is a slow digesting protein. That's what cheese is generally made of. And then there's whey protein. Now, whey protein is the most researched sports nutrition supplement in history and is the most effective muscle building protein we have yet to discover. Now, there is a difference between whey proteins. Some of them are just waste products that they turn into another product to turn a profit. And then there are ones that are manufactured with care so that they preserve the growth factors and the immunoglobulins, the things that boost immunity and boost glutathione production. And so when I recommend a whey protein, I'm not recommending all whey proteins in the world. I'm recommending at least a grass-fed whey protein. But if you can get one that is medical grade, third-party tested, and it shows how much immunoglobulins and growth factors, like colostrum, for instance. Colostrum is found in mother's milk, and it's found in whey protein. That's the high-quality stuff, and it rebuilds a line of the digestive tract. It's also, there's a lot of reports that it helps build muscle tissue. But the whey protein has a really high content of an amino acid, a branched-chain amino acid called leucine, which is the trigger for muscle growth. It's called the mTOR pathway. And so you need a certain amount. It's somewhere between 3 and 3.6 grams to trigger that pathway to get that recovery turned back on. And so without going into the minute details of that, that is some points of consideration when it comes to dairy, because a lot of people are programmed that's bad, this is good, that's bad, this is good. And then they're really missing out. And what happens is they really have no food choices. And they start to develop this story of this bad, I can't eat this because it does this to me. And in actuality, a lot of times when we run the test and then you give them those, this is a really messed up test, but it's funny. One of my friends, he did it with his spouse because she got caught up in a lot of these foods and she's really smart. So it was funny because it could happen to her. It could happen to me, I know for sure, because she's way smarter than me. And, but she said, I can't have dairy. I'd never have dairy. It's dairy this, dairy that. And he's like, I don't think so, because she has dairy and she doesn't know it. And so she was drinking this protein shake, and it was made with milk. It was milk and pea protein. And so she's drinking cow's milk because that's what he was drinking. And she didn't know. She just started drinking because it tastes good. And he didn't realize it. And one day he sees her drinking. He's like, hey, how do you feel? And she was like, I love it. I noticed my everything's so much better. And what it was is she didn't know. And so there's something called thought-driven physiology. What is thought-driven physiology? I will be sharing the studies on this. It is mind-blowing. But what you believe, your perceptions about anything, about another person, about yourself, even about foods, will affect your body's response to it. So if you believe a food is bad for you, you will have a physiological effect. It will change the way you process that food, the way you metabolize it. And I would love to go into it now because I'm a nerd and I know you are, but I won't. So let's go to the next part. Gluten sensitivity. Now, what is gluten? A lot of people are like, oh, I can't have gluten. I'm gluten sensitive. And then I ask them what it is, and they don't know what it is. Gluten is a protein found in grains, primarily wheat. Now, how many people actually have a gluten sensitivity? Well, according to different studies, it's most of the studies show it's less than 1%, 0.6%. But there is a study that says as high as 6%. Now, both gluten sensitivity and lactose intolerance has decreased. I think it was 16% decrease in one of those. I can't remember which one, but I just read a study on that today. And then, so am I saying to have bread and pasta? I'm not. Because a lot of times you overeat those foods. So it's really easy to eat a ton of pasta or bread and things like that. So feeling full is really important. So it's something to experiment with. But look at yours. And if you have a significantly increased risk, then you probably already know that you don't do good with it. Now, if you have a less likely level, then hey, there may be foods that you can totally eat. You just, if you want to, like a sprouted wheat bread, you may do great on. Like sourdough bread, you would do great on because it doesn't have those problems. So keep that in mind. But this is how we use the DNA test. We put it into action bit by bit with the most important information, and then also we discard the things that don't matter because there's just some things that are not genetic, and it's more for entertainment. And so keep in mind, like where it says nutritional needs and has like all these minerals and vitamins, everybody needs all of those. All this is telling us is there's a couple things, like how much of it you need. And so, but everybody needs all the vitamins and minerals. That's just an example. All right, my friend, keep in mind, this is the process of self-mastery. And what matters most is how you live and how you show up. And so nutrition can be overwhelming because there's so much misinformation. What I would challenge you to do, what I invite you to do, is come in with an open mind, follow the plan, trust the process, measure. Don't base it off the way you feel, because our feelings are not accurate when they're feelings of fear. Fear creates an illusion. It magnifies, it exaggerates. So when we have these fears about food, it's a good thing because now we know what we need to focus on. We need to unravel those fear-based beliefs about everything in life. And then as we do, we become free. All right, my friends, you are lions, not lions. You tap into the real you, but you have to retrain yourself. The way you retrain yourself is you wake your ass up in the morning and you say, I am here for a reason and a purpose. And it's bigger than my moods. It's bigger than the difficulties of the day. I am here to live like a lion, not the fear of a lamb.